The autumn sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Judge Marcus Thompson hummed his daughter's favorite song. His phone buzzed with a text. She had just won her first debate competition. Beaming with pride, he gathered his briefcase and signature polka dot bow tie, a good luck charm passed down from his father, also a judge. The morning held a special kind of promise as Judge Thompson navigated his sleek silver Mercedes through downtown traffic. Classical music drifted softly from the speakers. Bach's So Sweet No. 1. His morning ritual for the past 15 years on the bench. The familiar notes helped him prepare mentally for the complex cases awaiting his attention. At a red light, he glanced at the framed photo on his dashboard. His daughter Sarah at her high school graduation, both of them grinning widely. Her text about winning the debate competition hadn't surprised him. She'd inherited his passion for justice and skilled rhetoric. Like father, like daughter, his wife often teased. The courthouse loomed ahead, its limestone facade glowing in the morning light. Judge Thompson pulled into his reserved parking space, gathering his thoughts along with his leather briefcase. Inside, he knew his clerk would have already organized the day's files. 3 property disputes, a complex contract case, and a young offender's hearing that he particularly wanted to handle with care. As he stepped out of his car, the crisp autumn air carried the scent of nearby coffee shops and freshly fallen leaves. He straightened his bow tie, the same polka dot pattern his father had worn during his 30 years of service in the same courthouse. Every morning, touching this familiar piece of silk reminded him of the legacy he carried and the responsibility to uphold justice with compassion and wisdom. Judge Thompson checked his watch, 8:45 a.m. Perfect timing for a quick review of the day's first case before court began at 9:30. His measured steps echoed against the pavement as he approached the courthouse, nodding good morning to familiar faces. Little did he know, this ordinary Tuesday was about to become anything but routine. Officer James Sullivan stood at attention near the courthouse's private entrance, his crisp uniform a stark contrast to the weathered stone walls behind him. At 26, he represented the youngest addition to the courthouse security team. His badge, still gleaming after 3 months of service, caught the morning light as he surveyed the arriving courthouse staff. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on his shoulders this morning. Just yesterday, his supervisor had praised his attention to detail and commitment to protocol. "You've got good instincts, Sullivan." The words still rang in his ears, boosting his confidence. His mentor's cardinal rule, protection with respect, had become his daily mantra. Sullivan watched as attorneys and clerks streamed through the public entrance, their briefcases and coffee cups painting a familiar picture of morning routine. His position at the private entrance, reserved for judges and senior court officials, demanded extra vigilance. The recent security briefing about unauthorized access attempts at courthouses across the state kept him especially alert. Through the morning crowd, he noticed a distinguished gentleman approaching with purposeful strides. The man wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit and carried a premium leather briefcase. Despite his professional appearance, Sullivan remembered his training. Appearances could be deceiving and protocol existed for everyone's safety. His hand instinctively touched his badge for reassurance as he took 2 steps forward. The morning sun briefly caught his nameplate, a detail his mother had proudly polished just last week. Drawing from his training at the academy, Sullivan straightened his posture and adopted a professional yet approachable stance. "Good morning, sir," he said clearly, his voice carrying the perfect balance of authority and courtesy that he practiced countless times. "May I see your credentials? This entrance is restricted to authorized personnel only." As the words left his mouth, Sullivan maintained eye contact, following every detail of his security training, while silently hoping he hadn't just delayed a senior court official. Time seemed to slow on those marble steps as both men stood their ground, the morning bustle of the courthouse fading into background noise. Judge Thompson took a measured breath, observing the young officer before him. Despite the interruption to his routine, something about Sullivan's demeanor caught his attention, not arrogance, but genuine dedication to his duty. The judge noticed subtle details: the officer's freshly pressed uniform, the way he maintained respectful eye contact, and most notably, the slight tremor in his hands that betrayed his youth and desire to perform his duties correctly. These small signs spoke volumes about the man's character, reminding Thompson of his own early days in the legal system. A gentle breeze rustled the nearby maple trees, carrying with it the faint sounds of the awakening city. The morning sun had risen higher now, warming the courthouse steps where they stood. Other court employees slowed their pace as they passed, creating an impromptu audience to the unfolding scene. Judge Thompson thought of his daughter's debate victory text from earlier. She had once asked him how he maintained his composure in challenging situations. "It's not about proving who's right," he had told her. "It's about finding the path to understanding." Those words echoed in his mind now as he reached for his credentials. His movements were deliberate and calm as he retrieved his identification from his wallet. Years of experience had taught him that these moments carried weight beyond the immediate interaction. They had the power to either build bridges or deepen divides. The polka-dot bow tie at his neck seemed to remind him of his father's wisdom. Your response to a challenge shapes its outcome. The leather of his wallet creaked softly as he opened it, the sound barely audible above the distant traffic. Judge Thompson noticed a family photo in Officer Sullivan's workspace, a subtle reminder that everyone had their own story, their own reasons for the choices they made. This realization softened something in his expression as he prepared to handle this situation with the same wisdom he applied in his courtroom. Officer Sullivan's eyes widened as he studied the credentials in his hands, realization dawning across his features. The photograph matched the distinguished man before him, but it was the name that made his heart skip a beat: the Honorable Marcus Thompson, Superior Court Judge. More than just any judge, this was the same Judge Thompson whose words had inspired Sullivan's entire graduating class of the Academy. Memories flooded back. The graduation ceremony 3 months ago, where Judge Thompson had delivered a keynote speech that changed Sullivan's perspective on law enforcement. The true measure of justice, he had said, lies not in the power we wield, but in the dignity with which we serve. Those words had been etched in Sullivan's notebook, which still sat in his locker downstairs. The morning sun suddenly felt warmer on Sullivan's face as color rose in his cheeks. His fingers, still holding the judge's credentials, trembled slightly. He remembered how Judge Thompson had stayed after the ceremony, shaking hands with every graduate, looking each one in the eye with genuine interest in their aspirations. In the background, the courthouse clock chimed 9 times, its deep resonance matching the rhythmic pounding in Sullivan's chest. He noticed now what he hadn't before: the famous polka-dot bow tie that Judge Thompson was known for, a symbol of maintaining humanity in the formal world of law. The same tie he had worn at the graduation. Court employees continued to pass by, their footsteps echoing off the limestone walls. A few familiar faces among them recognized the judge, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and respect. Sullivan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on his shoulders, heavier than his tactical vest. Judge Thompson stood patiently, his presence as steady as the courthouse pillars behind them. There was no anger in his expression, no hint of indignation, only the same thoughtful consideration Sullivan remembered from graduation day. The young officer swallowed hard, his academy training warring with his instinct to apologize profusely for the delay. "That's a remarkable tie pin," Judge Thompson said warmly, breaking the tense silence. His eyes focused on the small silver scales of justice adorning Sullivan's uniform. The morning light caught the polished surface, making it gleam like a tiny beacon. "My father wore one just like it during his 30 years of service." The unexpected comment caught Sullivan off guard, his rehearsed apology dying on his lips. He instinctively touched the pin, a graduation gift from his mother, who had saved for months to buy it. She had presented it to him with tears in her eyes, proud of her son for being the first in their family to wear a uniform. "It was my mother's gift, Your Honor," Sullivan found himself saying, his voice steadier than he expected. "She said it would remind me why I chose this path." He paused, amazed at how a simple pin could bridge the gap between a rookie officer and a respected judge. Judge Thompson's expression softened further, memories of his own early days flooding back. He recalled his father's words about how the smallest details often created the strongest connections. The growing morning crowd around them seemed to fade away as he made a decision. "Officer Sullivan," the judge said, noting the nameplate on the young man's uniform, "I believe we both could use a cup of coffee." He gestured toward the courthouse doors. "My chambers have a view of the city, and I've been told I brew a decent cup. Perhaps you'd join me?" Sullivan blinked in surprise, his posture relaxing slightly. The same hands that had trembled while checking credentials now steadied as he realized this moment could be transformative. Through the courthouse windows, he could see the morning sun illuminating the judge's chambers on the third floor. "I'd be honored, Your Honor," Sullivan replied, a genuine smile replacing his professional mask. As they turned toward the entrance, the young officer noticed something else about the judge's famous polka dot bow tie. It wasn't perfectly straight, making him somehow more approachable, more human. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled Judge Thompson's chambers as sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting warm patterns on the book-lined walls. Two ceramic mugs sat on the antique desk, steam rising in delicate spirals. The judge had inherited the coffee maker from his predecessor, a simple machine that had witnessed countless conversations over the years. "Colombian blend," Judge Thompson explained, sliding one mug towards Sullivan. "A habit I picked up during my first year of law school." He settled into his leather chair, not behind the desk as usual, but beside it, creating an atmosphere of equality rather than authority. Sullivan wrapped his hands around the warm mug, breathing in the rich aroma. His eyes wandered to a framed photograph on the wall. A younger Judge Thompson standing beside his mother at his law school graduation. The pride in her eyes mirrored what Sullivan had seen in his own mother's face at the police academy graduation. "Your speech at our graduation," Sullivan began, finding courage in the informal setting, about serving with dignity. "It changed how I view this uniform." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My mom raised me alone after Dad passed. She worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. When I told her I wanted to join law enforcement, she was scared at first." Judge Thompson nodded knowingly, remembering his own mother's concerns when he chose law. "Fear often comes from love," he responded, taking a thoughtful sip of coffee. "My father was a judge during more challenging times. He taught me that true authority comes from understanding, not power." The morning light shifted, creating new shadows on the wall as they shared stories. Sullivan spoke about his dreams of advancing in law enforcement to help support his mother. The judge listened intently, occasionally nodding, sharing his own story of accidentally filing evidence in the wrong case as a young clerk, a mistake that taught him the value of humility. As their coffee cups emptied, Judge Thompson leaned forward, his eyes brightening with sudden inspiration. The morning sunlight had shifted, casting a golden glow across his desk where case files lay momentarily forgotten. "What if we turned this moment into something meaningful?" he asked, his voice carrying the same enthusiasm that had characterized his graduation speech. Sullivan sat straighter in his chair, intrigued. The judge rose and walked to his whiteboard, uncapping a marker with purpose. "Every day, people enter this courthouse. Officers, judges, clerks, attorneys, each with their own perspectives, their own stories." He began sketching a simple organizational chart. But how often do we truly understand each other's roles? At the academy, Sullivan contributed, gaining confidence. We learned protocols, but rarely the reasoning behind them from the judicial perspective. He thought of his fellow officers, how they sometimes questioned certain courthouse procedures. And I bet many judges haven't experienced modern security training firsthand. The judge nodded enthusiastically, adding more notes to the board. "Exactly. What if we created a program, let's call it Walking in Their Shoes, where professionals from different courthouse roles could share their experiences?" His marker moved quickly now, outlining a comprehensive plan. Monthly sessions, rotating speakers, practical scenarios. Sullivan stood up and moved closer to the board, his own ideas flowing. We could include security demonstrations, mock scenarios. He paused, then added more confidently, I could help coordinate with the security team. Show how we make split-second decisions while maintaining respect for everyone who enters these doors. The energy in the room was palpable as they built upon each other's suggestions. Judge Thompson added notes about judicial perspectives, ethical considerations, and the importance of dignity in every interaction. Sullivan contributed ideas about practical security protocols and the challenges officers face. The main conference room of the courthouse buzzed with anticipation as over 50 professionals gathered for the sixth session of Walking in Their Shoes. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating a diverse crowd of judges, officers, clerks, and administrative staff, all wearing name tags that displayed their roles with pride. Judge Thompson stood at the podium, his signature polka dot bow tie perfectly aligned. Beside him, Officer Sullivan adjusted the presentation screen, looking considerably more confident than he had that fateful morning 6 months ago. The program they had envisioned had exceeded everyone's expectations, becoming a model for other courthouses across the state. Today's session, the judge began, his voice carrying the warmth of a mentor, focuses on the delicate balance between security and accessibility. He gestured to the audience, where new faces sat alongside familiar ones. Officer Sullivan will demonstrate how split-second decisions shape our courthouse culture while maintaining the dignity of everyone who walks through our doors. Sullivan stepped forward, touching his silver scales of justice pin for luck. The same pin that had sparked their conversation now gleamed under the conference room lights. 6 months ago, I learned that sometimes our greatest teaching moments come from our most challenging situations. He shared, exchanging a knowing glance with Judge Thompson. The success of their program had rippled beyond the courthouse walls. Local news had covered their initiative, and 3 neighboring counties had requested their guidance in implementing similar programs. But perhaps most meaningful were the small changes, the increased eye contact between staff members, the respectful nods between officers and judges, the sense of shared purpose that pervaded the courthouse halls. As Sullivan began his presentation, Judge Thompson observed the engaged faces in the audience. He thought about his daughter, now considering law school herself, and how this program might shape the professional environment she would one day enter. The morning sun caught his bow tie, casting small polka dot shadows on his notes, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful changes start with a simple moment of understanding.